The doors of your car will close automatically. Please keep your head and arms inside and remain seated at all times. And please, no smoking. Thank you.
Matterhorn Matt presents Matterhorn Mondays.
Hey there, Mountaineers. Welcome to episode 6 of Matterhorn Mondays. I'm Matterhorn Matt, and this week my guest is Alex, a historian. Say hi, Alex.
Hello, everybody.
And he has his own YouTube channel, so for the new viewers that don't know who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about your channel?
Sure. Well, my channel has a few different shows on it. One of them is a lecture series where I talk about each attraction at Disneyland and the history behind it, all the way up till what is there today. And my other show is a vlog series where I go into the park and talk about items and places of historical interest. And I have a third show that I just started where I talk about my thoughts on certain projects happening in the parks.
Yeah, guys, he's got super interesting videos, and I would definitely recommend giving his channel a look and a subscribe. And today's topics are Fantasyland Expansion, and we're going to talk about what Alex's experience was working at Disneyland. But we're going to save that one for later once we get through this first topic, which is Fantasyland Expansion. And we all know Disney is planning probably an expansion for what's currently in the place of Fantasyland, and I wanted to know what your ideas were on what they would add or take away, or just anything that's on your mind about it.
Oh boy, where do I begin? Well, a lot of people will not agree with me on this, but I think that they should look at removing Storybook Land and the Casey Jr. Circus Train.
Oh, okay.
Because there's the whole area where those two rides take up, as well as the Fantasyland Theater, and that huge area could be reused as part of the new Fantasyland expansion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what I would like to see in that area would be, well, I guess the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train coaster. I'd really like to see that. But there's a lot of people who would say, well, of course, everybody wants Disney to copy all their rides. So I'd say my second option would be actually a version of the Casey Jr. Circus Train that you would actually see at Paris. They have one that is kind of like a kid's roller coaster.
Oh, okay.
And so that one would be actually kind of cool if they wanted to keep the idea of Casey Jr. Circus Train, but just upgrade it to a more fast-paced kind of child's roller coaster kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, and then north of that, right where the Fantasyland Theater is, I'd like to see a dark ride, and it could be. Well, it could be anything, but I think most of all, I would really like to see a dark ride based off of Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, okay.
So that's something I'd like to see there. But I have thought of something else, which was maybe they could actually demolish Toontown and make kind of like a single street, like I would call it Mickey Street, but a little version of Toontown that parallels the Toontown Depot, the train station.
Mm-hmm.
So that way you could still say that you're stopping at Toontown Station, but it's a smaller version and would focus on the meet and greets with the Fab Five.
Okay.
So that's something I've thought about that area, and maybe if they wanted to do a Beauty and the Beast dark ride, it would probably go in the space that was once Toontown itself.
Okay, those are some awesome ideas. I don't think they've ever, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they've ever done like a Beauty and the Beast themed like dark ride or any kind of attraction, correct?
Yeah, I don't think they have either.
And
To the best of my knowledge, yeah.
that's crazy because it's one of their most popular movies. At least that's what I think. Yeah, I love the movie, and it really deserves its own ride. And I agree with you on that. And oh my gosh, what to do with Toontown? I would, agree with you. Just get rid of Toontown, maybe rebuild it, like how you said. But I feel like they could use that area as like something better, like how they have in Walt Disney World. They don't have like a Toontown per se. They have, I think it's called the Fantasyland Fair or something like that. And it's I think it's Fantasyland Circus now that I'm thinking about it. It just has something to do with circuses. That's all I know, because it's themed to this like cute little carnival circus traveling thing, and I don't know. I just feel like I'd like to see that over here more than what we have now. And oh man, I'd say I want them to move the Little Mermaid from California Adventure into like a new spot, in Fantasyland, and maybe theme it more like they have it in Orlando with like the castle and everything. I feel like that would be a really neat addition to Fantasyland. And let's see, Casey Jr. Of all the times I've been to Disneyland, this last year was the first time I've ridden on Casey Jr. And I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'1". I cannot fit inside of those little train compartments or whatever they are. And I don't know. I feel like it smells like gasoline too. I don't really remember. And yeah, riding that kind of gave me a little headache because of the smell. And man, I don't know. I don't know if I'd like to see that go though.
Yeah, you know what? What's interesting is in Fantasyland in Magic Kingdom Park in Orlando, they decided to bring in the Snow White Scary. I'm sorry. They decided to remove Snow White Scary Adventures and replace it with the roller coaster, Seven Dwarfs Mine Train.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because they wanted something exciting that the whole family could ride, and and it would be fun. And I really like the idea of that coaster, but I also don't like the idea of them exactly just duplicating it here at Disneyland. So I that's why I've been thinking for a long time about the Casey Jr. Circus Train in Paris, because that one, it's really like a mini roller coaster. You go over these hills and bumps, and and it's really cool, and of course very smooth. And I thought, that would be a great way to replace the Casey Jr. Circus Train that we have now, and still have something that is pure Disneyland instead of just Disney parks, in general.
Yeah.
And for anybody that kind of knows Disneyland geography, there's a backstage road that goes between what was once the Big Thunder Ranch area and Fantasyland. So there's a road there that goes right behind the Fantasyland Theater, goes underneath the railroad tracks, which is where the Toontown Tunnel is today, and goes right back up along the west side of Toontown. Well, I was thinking that if they do demolish Toontown as it is today, they could use that backstage road as a second entrance to a new land that they would make out of Toontown. Because, as you know, Toontown is kind of a dead end. There's only one way in and out, and that's one of the big problems with it, is that there's no real crowd flow. And so I think that what they could do is use that backstage road as a second entrance from the area where Big Thunder Ranch turns into Fantasyland, and then in that land they might have, I don't know, it would be kind of cool if they did like a Beauty and the Beast mini land, where there's the town and there's a place to eat, there's some shops, and then there's the main dark ride, which of course would have to take up most of the land. But But then you could also enter back into Fantasyland through the current Toontown entrance that is there today. And then maybe once again, where Toontown Depot is for the Disneyland Railroad, there could be a little mini street there with the Disney characters' houses, and that could be called Toontown instead.
Hmm.
And that way, you're still saving the best parts of Toontown. You're saving the Fab Five's houses, and you're saving uh, parts of Fantasyland for a good use, really. I mean,
Hmm.
it's maximizing the space. And so basically, you'd have uh, this nice big circular area that you could walk from over by the Big Thunder Trail all the way up north to the new Beauty and the Beast land, and then
Hmm.
back south over by um, It's a Small World. I'm talking a lot, so I'm kind of losing track of what I'm saying.
No, yeah, that sounds awesome. I didn't realize that there was like a little backstage road or like you said. But yeah, Beauty and the Beast land, that would be pretty cool because the architecture in the film takes place in Germany or Paris, right?
It takes place in France, yeah.
France. Okay, yeah, cuz the architecture in France is really awesome and Disney does a good job showcasing that in Epcot in the World Showcase. And I think that would look actually really cool. Um yeah, as a really cool addition to Fantasyland. And this idea just popped into my head while you were talking. If they did get rid of Casey Jr. and the Storybook Canal, like you said, they might be able to move back Dumbo to increase the flow of traffic because that gets kind of congested during the busy parts of the day, right?
Oh yeah, very congested.
Yeah, and getting rid of Casey Jr. and the and the Storybook Canal boats, I think they could move back Dumbo like a couple, maybe like a yard or so. I don't know, and that could really help with the traffic flow. But I don't know.
Yeah, I
Eh,
mean, when I get my creative juices flowing, I think that I could imagine them being able to actually move Dumbo back a couple yards, maybe up to 12 feet.
mm-hmm.
You
Yeah,
know, that would
definitely.
provide some walking space.
Yeah, and also getting rid of the canal boats would open up that area between the teacups and where Storybook is right now, and there could be more guest flow that way. And I was just looking on my phone at the Casey Jr. ride in Paris, and that looks super cool. It's still, like Casey Jr., but it's like a roller coaster. That's really awesome.
Wow, you looked that up right now?
Yes, I looked it up on
Wow,
my phone.
technology is amazing, isn't
I know, right?
it?
But yeah, that would be super cool. And I agree with you. I don't want Disney to just keep copying other attractions from their other parks.
Mhm.
Copying the Tron ride from Shanghai to Walt Disney World isn't this I would say is not the same as copying the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train over to Disneyland because not a lot of people get to go to the Disneyland in Shanghai and will be able to experience that. But people who live in the US might like switch back and forth between Disneyland and Walt Disney World every other year for their vacation and whatnot, and they'd be able to experience, the same ride there at both parks. And yeah, I'd totally be down for the Casey Jr. ride over the Seven Doors Mine Train.
Oh yeah, I think that would just be really great. Uh, and then I was thinking about, because New Fantasyland in Magic Kingdom, they already have a Beauty and the Beast themed restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
which is great. Like my mom really loves Beauty and the Beast, and she would have loved to see the restaurant. I think she got to actually experience the restaurant. I think she celebrated her anniversary there.
Oh, okay.
Um, and Disneyland, I think that they're trying to duplicate that because they created the Red Rose Tavern
Yeah.
out of what used to be Village House that was Pinocchio themed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because they're trying to test the waters and see if maybe they could duplicate the Beauty and the Beast restaurant here.
Okay.
So I think that honestly, if they turned Toontown into a little tiny Beauty and the Beast land, they could probably do a restaurant there, a dark ride, and maybe like a small gift shop or something. I mean, really, there isn't a lot of space there because the dark ride would take up most of the space. But I would really like to see that because Toontown doesn't, to me, it just doesn't feel like Disneyland. It just
Yeah.
feels out of place. And but then again, I love the fact that you can go to Goofy's house, you can go to Mickey and Minnie's house.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't necessarily want to get rid of those houses. So that's why I was thinking about that little Mickey Street next to Toontown Depot. It would just make sense. And on top of that, the biggest thing is that I was thinking about was the Disneyland Railroad has the station announcements by Jack Wagner, the original voice of Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
And there he mentions that stops at New Orleans Square, Mickey's Toontown, and Tomorrowland. And so if you got rid of Toontown altogether, you'd have to alter that narration.
Ah, that's true. Yeah.
So I was thinking, well, I'd hate to get rid of more of Jack Wagner because he's the original voice of Disneyland. So
Mm.
keeping a little Mickey Street with just the main characters' houses there, and then a little station for you to stop at, I think that would just be really great, and it saves that little tidbit of Jack Wagner's voice from being removed entirely. Um, but here's something I wanted to talk about, which is I'm afraid that Disney is no longer thinking necessarily about the future.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel like for the past maybe 5 almost 10 years, they've just been worried about throwing more intellectual properties into their parks
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the future of what the development would be. So let me say this, for instance. They added Cars Land to California Adventure not because they thought it fit,
Mm-hmm.
but because they wanted California Adventure to be more popular, and they knew that a Cars themed land would be very popular and bring guests into the park. So they were thinking more about the popularity and the money that it would make as opposed to how it fit into the park,
Mm-hmm.
because technically Radiator Springs is in Arizona, so not California. So then there's the fact that they're adding Star Wars Land to Disneyland. And somebody said the other day, they said, well, at least Disney is making Star Wars Land very separate from the main park. So that way it doesn't detract from the main park. And I said,
That's not a very good
that's,
argument.
well, it's not, but here's why I say it's not a good argument.
Mm.
Because Disney knows that Star Wars Land doesn't fit in Disneyland. It doesn't
Yes.
make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so they say, so that shows you that Disney is thinking more about the profits than they are thinking about the continuity of the park. So even though like you and I are talking right now about this, about ideas for doing a new Fantasyland, and how it makes sense to do a Beauty and the Beast land, it makes sense to retain the Fab Five house,
Mm-hmm.
and no one wants to get rid of Casey Jr., so maybe we'll make it into a kind of faster paced little roller coaster.
Yeah.
We're thinking of all this because of how it fits into the park. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that Disney isn't thinking that way anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And they might not want to consider, when they actually do start working on our Fantasyland, they may not want to consider how their new ideas fit in, more just if those new ideas will make money.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And that's just the sad thing about the company today. Michael Eisner, I would argue that he put forth a lot of great ideas, but they're also very big ideas, money-wise. And, man, with Bob Iger, he bought Star Wars and what is the other thing? Marvel. And now that they have both of those two properties, there's really no way, to squeeze them into the Anaheim parks and have them, I guess, fit the whole theme of everything. And
Mhm.
I know they have that problem too over in Florida, because what does Star Wars have to do, or a Star Wars land have to do with retro Hollywood, you know? And same with
Mhm.
Toy Story Land and Cars Land, and you know, all those other stuff. And man, yeah, that's just really sad to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that we're getting these new lands because a lot of people are really excited. Like, a lot of people think that I'm against Star Wars Land. I'm not against Star Wars Land. I'm just against where it is.
Hmm.
And, and I feel like Disney should really work on, on making these things mesh together really well because, I mean, you look at Disneyland, I mean, Walt Disney goes, here, I'm going to add the first new land to the park, uh, which is the New Orleans Square.
Hmm.
And he goes, but it can't be, we can't add New Orleans Square next to Tomorrowland. That
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. He goes, let's add it next to Frontierland, right next to my old New Orleans street, which is today Riverbell Terrace and Stage Door Cafe. That used to be what Walt called New Orleans Street because the architecture differs from the rest of Frontierland.
Hmm.
And he goes, if we put New Orleans right next to New Orleans Street, it'll make sense, And
Yeah.
so the west side of the park is all based off of the past, so it fits together. But then you go, oh, now we're gonna put Star Wars right next to Frontierland,
Hmm.
and you go, that's strange. I mean, true, Star Wars happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but it's the galaxy far, far away part that doesn't really make sense with Frontierland.
Hmm.
And so it just doesn't work in my opinion. And honestly, if they were to put a Star Wars land, I can't help but feel that it fits perfectly between Fantasyland and Tomorrowland, right
Yeah.
where right where Autopia currently sits in the submarines. I
Hmm.
can't help but think like, why doesn't Disney think about that part? Why is it always just profits,
Hmm.
They're supposed to be, the world's leading entertainment company, and it's because of their creativity. And they're not using their creative minds to think that way. Instead, it's just about quick, throw in a new intellectual property in the park. We need to get more profits, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah, that's how it is with Guardians of the Galaxy, replacing Tower of Terror, Cars Land, all that stuff. I'd rather have Cars Land in Disneyland than have Star Wars Land in Disneyland. I feel like Star Wars Land would fit better in California Adventure. Would you? How
Mhm.
would you feel about that?
I agree, and we've talked before about renaming California Adventure
Mm-hmm.
to Disney's Adventure Park or Disney Adventure Park, and uh, it's because everybody knows that California Adventure is just this curmudgeony of different ideas and different stories. I mean, for goodness sakes, in the same park, you're going to have, old California, you're going to have Radiator Springs, Marvel, and
Mm-hmm.
Pixar. It just doesn't make sense. And so when you have a park like that, you have to look at what does make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Disney's already mixed and matched the park beyond fixing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, how do we make the park make sense? And if you think about it, going to Radiator Springs and getting, on one of those cars and going to Marvel or going to Pixar Pier,
Mm-hmm.
it's like being on an adventure, but Disney style. So it makes sense now to rename the park Disney Adventure Park, um, as opposed to California Adventure, because it's not about California anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and some people out there are are thinking right now, oh, I can tell you how it fits into California, and let me tell you, that's they have a lot of weak arguments, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, Arizona's next to California, so Radiator
Oh.
Springs fits. you know, I'm like, no, it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyway, so yeah, so I would like, if Disney ever listens to this, I hope that they think about how the lands fit into the main theme of the park,
Mm-hmm.
because Disney knows that Star Wars doesn't fit into the main theme of Disneyland, which is why they're putting it so separately from the park, making it its own little place, surrounded and caged away from Disney, because they know it's not right. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying right now, and I can't really pinpoint the exact point where Disney started going down this hill, you know? They tried to revamp California Adventure to make it more California-like in 2012, and I don't know, I'd say that worked. I love Buena Vista Street. Hollywoodland is really bad, but the little... I always say this, the little area where the Grizzly River run and the Soren is, I can never think of the name, but I really love that area and the whole aesthetic it gives off. And oh man, renaming, man, yeah, we've talked about this I don't know how many times before, but Pixar Pier, Marvel Land, it just doesn't work. At least not in California Adventure. And man, I know I've said this before too, but Disney's like really in a pickle from what they can squeeze into each park, you know? In Florida, they have so much land, but even though they have so much land, they're building Star Wars land in as a part of Hollywood Studios, and I'm thinking to myself, Star Wars land may or may not warrant its own separate gate. And oh man, in Disneyland, they just don't have the room to add a whole third gate, you know, and buying up all that property would be cost a lot of money, you know. And I don't know. I feel like I'd rather have the California Adventure that we have now than the one that was built back in whenever it opened.
Yeah, 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's just so when I think about Fantasyland and how they might redo it, you know, I'm worried that that they're going to be altering the land in a way that just doesn't work. But you know, so I think of the area where Autopia and the monorail kind of zigzag over that area, and I try to and I'm trying to think. I had an idea before about what they could do with that area. Oh, I've kind of lost it, but in any case, I think that they could benefit from actually removing most of the zigzagging monorail track and kind of making it more like a single loop that surrounds that whole area. So that way you still get to see a little bit of Fantasyland, a little bit of, you know, Tomorrowland before you get to the Tomorrowland station. But that would help to free up the aerial space in that spot. And then as for Autopia, they could shorten it or remove it altogether. And if they kind of freed up that space there, got rid of the submarine voyage, because they'd have to do it if they wanted it to develop that area.
Yeah.
But it would be great if they wanted to do something like, I mean, I don't like Frozen, but I guess if they really wanted to, they could do like a little tiny Arendelle, you know, land there or something. Or something completely new, a whole new land to Disneyland. There's enough space there to do it.
Yeah.
So I tried to think of that spot too. Like that's a lot of acreage that could really benefit from having something new. And you know, the mountains of Arendelle could kind of fit with the Matterhorn, you know.
Okay, true. Yeah.
So, you know, so I think about that, and then, you know, they'd have to have like a lake or something with a little Nordic what do you call it? Boat, like a galleon.
Yeah.
So they could do that kind of stuff, and all the while they're still saving Small World Mall from being altered in any way. Because I like Small World Mall. I think it kind of works out.
Yeah, I do too. I feel like they could also benefit from getting rid of the You actually talked about this in your last episode. I think it was your last episode. And getting rid of the old little winding waterways from the phantom boats and using that land for maybe something. I think that whole little area, part of it is a smoking area, I'm pretty sure. And I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I'm in a pickle. I really want them to get rid of the submarine voyage, like you said, and like we've said a whole bunch of times before, and putting something else Fantasyland themed there, because oh man, I just had an idea of putting the Little Mermaid attraction right there where the submarine voyage is right now, and I feel like I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about it, that wouldn't really go along with the Tomorrowland kind of architecture and all that stuff. But I don't know. I just really want the Little Mermaid ride in Fantasyland and not in California Adventure.
Oh yeah, that's something else too. Like I would really like. I think I mentioned this before in another episode, but I'll go ahead and say it again here. It'd be nice if over in California Adventure, where the Little Mermaid ride is, if they literally just moved Little Mermaid to Fantasyland and in its place put a Omnimover version of Finding Nemo there, so that way it kind of goes along with Pixar Pier, you know.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, moving the Little Mermaid over to Fantasyland, and who knows, maybe that spot I was just talking about, where if you moved the monorail track around, got rid of the motorboat cruise, got rid of parts of Autopia and the submarine voyage, you could probably put the Little Mermaid ride there. I mean, you could separate it visually with trees and a berm and stuff like that, so that way you can't see it from Tomorrowland. But it'd be great because, well, you see where the main lagoon for the submarine lagoon is. I feel that we should keep that main lagoon there.
Yeah, I was gonna
because
say.
you know, water next to Matterhorn, it's always been there, you know what I mean? So I think it'd be great to have that little lake there, and it would kind of it would be right next to the Little Mermaid ride, and so it would kind of go together that way, and it act as a visual barrier once again. So, you know, so yeah, I think that they could definitely put Little Mermaid in Fantasyland, but that's up to them, you know, wanting to move it from one park to the other. But honestly, I feel like if they have the budget to redo the Little Mermaid in DCA into a Finding Nemo version, then part of that budget could go to reopening Little Mermaid in Fantasyland. See, that's another one of the things that I was talking about of continuity, that Disney just threw Little Mermaid into DCA because it needed another ride, you know what I mean? But they didn't think about how it fit there. And honestly, Little Mermaid fits better in Fantasyland, where all the classic storybook characters are. And so Disney's not thinking about that. They're just throwing stuff in there.
Yeah, man, no one wanted to see Whoopi Goldberg, Golden Dreams in California Adventure. And man, I think we talked about this last week, about replacing Mr. Toad with something. And I think I brought up putting Winnie the Pooh there, since he's a storybook. I guess you could argue he's a storybook character, and would maybe fit better in Fantasyland more than Critter Country. But man, I don't know. There's just so many moving parts. If you want to expand out past the Matterhorn, you'd have to get rid of the submarines, possibly shorten Utopia. But man, if you want to, like you said, replace Casey Jr. and the storybook Grand Canal boats, those are like, you know, two classic rides. And it's also, I feel like it costs a lot of money to level all of that out too. I don't know. I feel like they're just in a pickle with what they can do with however much land is available there, budget-wise and, you know, idea-wise.
Well, you know, it's easy for us both to say in hindsight, you know, like what we think the park should look like. And I think actually a lot of people would agree with both opinions of yours and mine. And
Mm.
like for instance, it makes sense to move Winnie the Pooh to Fantasyland, but
Yeah.
then you're talking about, reshaping the park as it is to fit more congruently, which is a good way to spend money, I think, but Disney would never do it, like,
Mm-hmm.
they would, have an aneurysm if you told them, hey, let's move Winnie the Pooh to Fantasyland where it belongs,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so, but I mean, it would be great that whatever they do for this new Fantasyland expansion, it would be great if they really thought about the future and thought
Yeah.
about how it fit, whatever they add to it. Um, but, Storybook Land Canal Boats, I really feel that should be on the chopping block because it takes up a lot of space on its own. I mean, I know that Casey Jr. kind of rides over it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, the queue for it really bottlenecks that area of Fantasyland.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get into the main part of Fantasyland. And on top of that, it's just, you know, it's still popular, I guess you could say, but there's really no point in keeping it there anymore with today's crowd. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's just a bunch of models of storybook things, and I don't know. I feel like there could be a better use of that space.
Yeah.
And once again, I go back to saying, the roller coaster version of Casey Jr. That's what Walt wanted, actually.
Oh, okay.
Originally when they were developing the Casey Jr. circus train, there was supposed to be a lot of hills, and the train, it's still built this way to this day, but the train is actually capable of going up several hills and then sliding down the other side.
Hmm.
Um, they built it that way, but the budget for actually constructing Casey Jr. Circus Train and the time that they had limited them, so they couldn't actually build the roller coaster version as it was. Instead, it's a lot of flat circles that it kind of goes around.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you that the track, the way it was designed, and the way that the locomotive on the train was designed, it was supposed to be able to go up several hills and roll down the other side.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
crazy to think about. Wow. Um, yeah. I don't know. I'd totally be down for a Casey Jr. roller coaster because it's. I think you said this earlier. It's like classic, Fantasyland, and yeah. I mean, storybook canal boats. They're okay.
Mhm.
I just ride it to take pictures of the little models and the ducks that I see sleeping on the grass. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like we've talked about this topic for a long time. Well, I guess that's going to do it for this topic. Let's go ahead and move on to the second topic, and one that I'm super excited to talk about. Alex's experience working at Disneyland. Now, why don't you go ahead and start off telling us all the different jobs that you've had throughout the years at Disneyland?
All right. Well, I've spent approximately 6 consecutive years at the park. Um, and I started off as a busboy cleaning tables and taking out trash for the riverfront restaurants, which was a section of Disneyland that they designated as part of Riverbell Terrace, Golden Horseshoe, Stage Door Cafe, and even Bengal Barbecue Restaurant. And so I did that for my first 2 years at Disney. And eventually, after 2.5 years of doing it, uh, I had been convinced to join guest relations because I was already an amateur Disney historian. I knew a lot about the parks, and a lot of people liked to hear me talk about it. So they said, why don't you join guest relations? So I went to guest relations and I was accepted in, and I spent time there learning different parts of the department, such as uh, Lost and Found, the information booths, the guest locker room area, and let's see, oh, and City Hall.
Hmm.
And then I became a tour guide. I was doing let's see, Walk in Walt's footsteps, and then I was barely starting to do uh, the private tours, and I had some difficulty at City Hall because it was really difficult to work that. There was a lot of thinking involved. So basically, I left the department and I went to work in Adventureland. I was there for 1 week at Indiana Jones Adventure, and they needed me to help open Cars Land and Buena Vista Street in 2012. And they needed experienced bussers who could lead the teams because they had hired all these bus boys and bus girls, and, and they had no leadership there really to teach people how to do it the Disney way. So I was brought over to back to Foods, but this time at California Adventure, and I helped on the same day, opening day of Cars Land and Buena Vista Street. I was working both those areas on the same day. I was running back and forth from Buena Vista Street at Fiddler Pfeiffer and Practical Cafe, teaching the bussers how to bus the tables, and then I quickly ran over to Cars Land to Flo's V8 Cafe to teach the bussers there how to clean and stuff like that. So I was one of the opening crew who did both of that, and then I was moved to be a bus boy at what's it called, Pacific Wharf. So that includes the Lucky Fortune Cookery, the Cocina Cucamonga, and the Pacific Wharf Cafe. So I ended up leaving Disney at that point because I wanted to look for other jobs elsewhere, and I eventually, after going to culinary school, wanted to get more experience in the kitchen. So I came back to Disney, and they put me as a cook in Blue Bayou.
Oh, okay.
So I worked at Blue Bayou cooking salmon, cooking lobster and steaks, and even the what's it called? The lamb, stuff like that. And I worked at Blue Bayou for a good year and a half, and that's when I left Disney for the last time. So that's my experience at the parks.
Man, that's really crazy. I just wanted to say right off the bat, it's always been a dream of mine to be a tour guide at Disney, because obviously I'd still have, a lot to learn, because compared to you and all those other tour guides out there, I only know like a small fraction of all that stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like that'd be a really cool thing to do. And oh man, I had something else I wanted to say. I can't remember. If I remember, I'll bring it up. But I wanted to ask you what your favorite experience was working at the park.
My favorite experience was when I was in guest relations. We had this really, it was really amazing. This old woman came in with her family, and they came into City Hall actually, and it was this old woman and her children, but her children were really already old. They were already like senior citizens, I think. So it was an old family is what I'm trying to say. And anyway, they came in and they were asking questions about the park, and their mother was in a wheelchair, obviously, so she had to transfer from rides. And so I was helping them out with what rides to transfer at, and showing them what they could do with their day. And meanwhile, they had mentioned that their mother was a big Mickey Mouse fan. That ever since Mickey Mouse first came out in cartoons, she had loved it as a little girl, and she had been a massive collector of Mickey Mouse stuff all these years. But she had never ever visited Disneyland or Walt Disney World. Oh. So basically, the children had saved up all their money for the past couple years, maybe up to a decade, in order to take this trip and take their mother to Disneyland. And so they were really happy that I gave them all this advice and where to go and what to do. But I had also, unbeknownst to them, set up a private meet and greet with Mickey Mouse.
Oh, okay.
So I told them, I said, come back to City Hall at around 3 p.m. I said, just come back then, and I have something to give you. So they said, okay, we'll go. And they left and went on into the park. I called characters. There's a number that you can call. And I called them and I said, hey, is there any chance that you can bring Mickey Mouse out to City Hall at around this time or sooner or whatever? I said, because there's someone that's a really big fan, and she's, I told them the story. And so they said, yeah, and they set up a time. It was actually at 3 p.m. They said, okay, we can have Mickey come over there. So the family came back, and I led them into the mayor's office, which is a cool little room. If you ask the guest relations people nicely, they'll open the room for you. It's a little private room.
Okay.
And so we went in there, and the old lady in the wheelchair was so surprised. She couldn't believe that right there, waiting for her at the desk, was Mickey Mouse. And so I let them have their private time. I shut the door. They hung out, took pictures with Mickey, and, just had a fun time. And so Mickey had to leave. He's, got a busy schedule. So he left. And on their way out, the old woman was just smiling, and she said, oh my gosh, I can't believe that, Mickey wanted to meet me, and so it felt really great. And that's not the end of the story. They had went home, and they got my information because they wanted to give me a compliment at City Hall. So they got my information, and I'd like to say it was a week later, maybe a bit more, they called me and they told me that they got a hold of me, actually, and they said that they had brought their mother to Disneyland because she was basically she was gonna die. She was really old, and so it was her dying wish to visit Disneyland and try to meet Mickey Mouse. And they said that the fact that I made that happen for them was really amazing. They said that just the day before they had called me, their mother passed away.
Oh.
But they were so happy that her last memory was of meeting Mickey Mouse, the person she's always wanted to meet since she was a little girl and saw the cartoons. So that was the greatest moment.
Wow.
Working for Disney, that still is in my memory.
That is amazing. Okay, that's what Disney's all about. Making those memories that just last forever. And I'm gonna tear up right now. That was an amazing story. That's what really sets Disney apart from Universal, all those other parks you want to compare Disneyland to. And wow, that was, I don't know what to say. I'm speechless. That was amazing. I remember what I was gonna say earlier. I wanted to say the people that bust the tables at the, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name. It's the restaurant in New Orleans Square right next to Stage Door Cafe. Which one is that?
Oh, Riverbell Terrace?
Yes, those people are so friendly. And I wanted to give a shout out to Philip. If you're listening, he was a busboy and he helped us out on our last trip, and he was just a super cool dude. And I just remembered his name right now, and so shout out to Philip if he's listening. But yeah, okay. Let's see. What is your funniest experience that you've ever had with a character while working or while seen working?
Funniest experience. I don't remember having any particular funny experiences with characters, but I do have a story about a character. Okay, and this is going to be a little bit of a rant, actually. That's what'll make this funny, is my rant. Okay. So I told you that my first job was working as a busboy at Riverfront Restaurants, and that included Bengal Barbecue in Adventureland.
Mm.
And I was working at Bengal Barbecue, bussing tables, and let me tell you, I despised when Aladdin and Jasmine would come out. Okay? Because now the characters are told to be like their animated characters, right?
Oh, okay.
So Aladdin and Jasmine were mischievous,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what they're supposed to be like. So every time Jasmine and Aladdin came out, they would skip and jump around Adventureland, and I swear, Jasmine would take like a handful of napkins that was on like an empty table, and then she would spread them around in the air.
Oh my gosh.
Or one time, there was an empty paper plate with like some kind of funnel cake on it, and she pushed it off the table onto the ground. And and let me tell you, the story just keeps going on. I mean, they were very mischievous, and they would always make my seating area even messier than it already was. And so they would do this while skipping, past me. And oh my gosh. And I couldn't help but feel like it was like some kind of personal vendetta. Like they're like, haha, like I'm the prince, I'm the princess, and you're some busboy. I couldn't help but feel like that. But I mean, like I talked to my lead, and my lead's like, well, they're told to be mischievous, like Aladdin in the movie was like, always playing pranks on the guards and things like that, and stealing things from the cafes and stuff like that in the movie. So that's kind of what they are. But I was like, no, I hate that. So I hated whenever they came out. That was just my thing.
That was pretty funny. That was a good one. That was I didn't think, man, I don't think I've ever seen Aladdin and Jasmine ever like walk about Adventureland. Do they still do that?
I think so. Well, now they have their own little meet and greet over at Aladdin's Oasis. So now they're more subdued. But back then they didn't have a specific meet and greet spot, so they used to just roam around Adventureland, and that's when they would do. They would skip down Adventureland together, and would pretend to kind of dance and stuff like that. Basically, just have a merry old time, and people would meet up with them and go, "Oh my gosh, it's Aladdin and Jasmine!" So now they have their own little meet and greet, so they can't bother the bus boys. But
oh my gosh, thinking about that I just realized I don't think they've ever done. Have they ever done a Tarzan meet and greet before?
Yes, back when
Really?
Tarzan's treehouse first opened, they had Tarzan come out for a meet and greet at the bottom of the treehouse. And now a lot of people are going, wait a minute, Tarzan only wears a loincloth. Well, the character was in a buff suit. So he was in, kind of like Hercules. If you've ever seen Hercules in the park, it's not his actual muscles. He's in like a suit that looks like muscles.
Yeah.
So Tarzan was the same way. He was in like a suit that looked like a half-naked body. So, but yeah, they did have that. But that was back when I was a little kid.
Oh, okay. That's crazy. I've never met Tarzan in the parks before. I feel like I don't think I'd ever want to meet Tarzan. I don't think I've ever seen the movie, actually. And all you people that are going to comment, why haven't you seen Tarzan? I don't know. I tried watching it a couple times, and it just didn't do it for me, so.
Oh.
Let's see. I had one last, or maybe two. I have two last questions for you. What is something most people wouldn't know or wouldn't figure from being a cast member?
What do you mean,
like little, let's see, like little things, guests wouldn't guess would happen to cast members, or
let me see. Something guests wouldn't know that cast members do or go through or see. Well, as a cast member, you get to see a lot of stuff backstage. Like, a lot of stuff happens Um, you see characters that are half in their character suits and
Mm.
things like that. Trying to think of something specific that character that cast members do. Um, I can't think of anything actually. I'm drawing a blank. I don't know.
No, man, that's okay. If you think of something though in any next episodes, just bring it on up and we'll talk about it.
Oh, okay.
How about you tell us another funny story?
Okay. Let me think of something. I got tons of stories. Let's see. Um, so funny memory. I was working at Golden Horseshoe, and I had this coworker. She's a transsexual,
Mm.
and her name is Sabrina, and she worked with me a lot of times at the restaurant and stuff like that. Very nice person, really great to work with. So I'm working at Golden Horseshoe, and as you know, there's a stage show that they do. I think they still do the same show, where where the mayor's daughter comes out and does a little show about it's kind of like a bachelorette show where they like get some men from the audience and they're like gonna
Mm-hmm.
do like a bachelor show with her. Anyway, I had forgotten that there was this show. And so this guest walks in with their camera. They look so excited. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, like, I'm here to see the man that's dressed like a woman."
Oh.
And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" And they're like, "Yeah, I heard that they work here." I'm like, "What?" And I'm thinking that they're talking about Sabrina, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, "Oh my God, that is so mean." I told her, like, no, that no one here works like that. Like there's no one here. And so she looked really disappointed. And I was like, what are you, I'm thinking in my head, like, what are you here to take a picture of this person? That's
Mm-hmm.
mean. And then the show starts, right? And then the mayor's daughter, Sally Mae, comes out, and it's a man dressed as Sally Mae, the daughter. And
Oh.
that's what makes it funny is that he's got like a hairy chest and stuff like that. And so I'm
Oh.
sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, that I was so, I have no words for that. But that was just kind of like my little funny memory.
No, it sounds like an honest mix-up. The guest sound like how you described. He wasn't very, I guess, specific on whether there was a show going on. Is there anything else you wanna tell the people about all this stuff?
I'll talk about a a precious memory that I have.
Okay.
Okay, so I have this great memory of when I was first a busboy there, and I was working along the rivers of America. And so, as you know, they do Fantasmic there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was in 2009, and Fantasmic had just been renovated and was coming back. And and I had this lead that was actually my friend. His name was Dustin, and he tells me, "Oh, they're doing their their practice for Phantasmic tonight, because it's coming back in the next few weeks." And he
Mm-hmm.
says, if we stay past park closing, we can watch it. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So, so we do. We stay at the park, and after this is like 2 hours after the park closes, and Phantasmic starts, and there's no one on the rivers of America except for a few technicians, just some technicians watching. And so I pull up a chair at Riverbell Terrace, and me and my friend, we sit there at the table, and we get to watch all of Phantasmic unfold before us with no one else in the park watching.
Oh my gosh.
And it was just the coolest memory I have. I was just like, I was so flabbergasted. And let me tell you, when there's no one like standing in the rivers of America, the music is even louder than
Mm-hmm.
normal. It's like there's something about the acoustics where like the audience absorbs a lot of the sound. So
Mm-hmm.
like when there's no one there, it is extremely loud. But it was really cool.
All right, Alex. I've heard you have a couple, or maybe one, ghost story to talk about. So why don't you go ahead and talk about that?
Yes, I used to work at the Golden Horseshoe restaurant, and the Golden Horseshoe, to cast members who know, is probably the most haunted place in the park. And it's kind of funny because, like, when I first went to Golden Horseshoe, everybody seemed to know it was haunted. Like, everybody was on the same level. Like, they
Mm.
had all experienced something. And I didn't quite believe in it, I guess, at the time. I had never seen a ghost for myself.
Mm.
So, um, so I started working there, and I worked a lot of closing shifts. So the restaurant would close down, and it would be my job to put up all the chairs and stuff like that. And at this time, I didn't know much about the ghost. All I heard was that it was haunted. That's it.
Mm.
That's all I heard. And so I was closing up for the night. There's nobody in there. All the cashiers went out back to count their money and all that. And I was just left in the restaurant to put up the chairs. And so I'm putting up the chairs, sweeping, mopping, all that. And I hear laughter, like giggling, like a little
Oh my
girl.
gosh.
And I'm going, wow, it sounds like there's a little girl in here. But I'm like, oh, you know what? They're probably just right outside the front door. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but I keep hearing it, and like pitter patter of steps kind of running around.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to figure it out. So I'm like, well, maybe it's a little girl outside. So I went downstairs, and I went out the front door, and it's already like past midnight. So there's no guests really in the park. They're all on Main
Mm-hmm.
Street. And I look around, and there's nobody outside for hundreds of yards. There's nobody. And so I go back in the restaurant, and I I don't know what to think. So I just get back to work. And I look over at the stage, and the side of the curtains just moved like somebody was there.
Uh-huh.
And they like it was a big movement, like someone pushed back the curtain to get back there. And I was listening for like footsteps, like it was my lead or maybe some other coworkers, but nothing. The door didn't even open. I was listening the whole time. So the back door did not open. There was nobody walking around the stage, and I kept hearing the giggling. So I went up on stage, and I went back behind the curtain, and it's dark back there. There's nothing. The computers that run the show are turned off.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I was being watched. So that was the
Yay.
first time I really felt something that was kind of creepy. Now, uh, another day, I don't know how much longer after, but I was working in the Golden Horseshoe with a coworker, and it's kind of late at night. It's getting close to closing. Guests are still in the restaurant, and I'm upstairs, and I'm teaching this coworker how to work the restaurant, and I'm telling her what closing is like. And
Mm.
I said, "Oh, and you know what?" I said, "This restaurant is haunted." And she goes, "Really?" And I told her about the experience with the giggling and whatever. And so upstairs, there's only one family of guests left. There's a man, a woman, and what look like they're two kids, like a boy and a little girl, a blonde little girl, and a brown-haired little boy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm talking to her about this, and the little girl, gets up out of her seat, and she walks over to us, and she looks at us, and she goes, "Is this place haunted?" and
Oh.
and I'm thinking, oh no, she must have overheard us. Like, I don't want her to think the place is haunted,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, no, no, why would you think that? And she goes, because I swear I just saw a ghost.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, oh, I think to myself, that's creepy. So she walked back over and sat down with her family. I don't even think the family noticed she was gone, like that
Mm-hmm.
she walked away. So I'm thinking, wow, like she saw something that's weird. Whatever. So so couple maybe like a couple minutes later, maybe an hour later, we're downstairs. I'm still showing the girl how to put up the chairs, and finally the last guests are walking out of the restaurant for the night, and it's the family, the man, the woman, the two children.
Uh-huh.
And they're walking out with their little boy, but I don't see the little girl. And so
Oh my
and so
gosh.
I I said to them, like, "Oh, have a good night." I'm like, "Oh, where's your daughter?" And they look at me and they go, "We don't have a daughter."
What?
And I was like, "Oh my God." And so I'm like, "Okay, well, good night." And they walked out, and they're like, "Oh, whatever." They walked out, and so me and my coworker, this girl I've been training all day, she goes, "Oh my God, but they had a girl. She was sitting with them." I said, "I
Mm.
know," and so we both like thought to each other, "That's the weirdest thing." And so my lead comes back and she's like, "Okay, well, me and the cashiers are going to go count out. You know, if you need anything, ask, any questions." I said, "Wait, before you go," I said, "We just saw like a little girl and we thought she was part of a family, but she wasn't." And she goes, "Was she blonde?" And I go, "Yes, she was." She goes, "Yeah." She goes, "She haunts the restaurant." And we're like, "What?" And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "There's two ghosts here. She's one of them. She haunts the stage. She runs around on the stage all night giggling." And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's the little girl I heard the other day." So that's one of my ghost stories.
That is amazing. I have goosebumps right now. That was oh my gosh, I can't even imagine what was running through your mind when you found out that the family didn't have a girl. Ah.
I know. I was I couldn't even tell because I didn't believe in ghosts.
Mhm.
I didn't. And that was beyond, I don't have any explanation for that. She was sitting with the family, you
Mhm.
know? But now that I think back on it, she didn't have a plate of food in front of her, and the family never took notice of her.
Mhm.
So, and it was almost as if I didn't notice her hanging out with the family the entire time.
Mhm.
So it makes sense that like she wasn't really with them, but how do you honestly rationally explain that, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna say because your coworker saw it too,
She
and
did.
oh
She did.
my,
And she didn't want to work in the restaurant anymore.
really?
She
I'd
was
be
creeped out.
I'd be deterred from working there after seeing a ghost little girl too. That is crazy. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I'm gonna have to maybe be on the lookout next time I'm in Disneyland at the restaurant for a
Yeah.
blonde little girl.
Have you seen the movie Poltergeist, the original from the
Ah,
70s?
no, I've been meaning to watch it though.
Okay, well, the little girl looked like her. The little girl that says "they're here." She looked like her. So if you want to know what this little girl looked like, that's what she looked like.
I'm not even gonna Google it. I'm just gonna spook myself out.
I mean, she was a sweet-looking little girl, but I mean, she was as solid as a person.
Uh-huh.
She didn't even know she was a ghost.
Oh my gosh. That is I don't have words. That is crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. I think okay, yeah, I guess I'll just end it there and then edit it and weave it into the original podcast, but that's crazy. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Do you know what kind of ghost the other one was? Cuz you said there were two, right?
The other one was a man that we all called Freddy.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
he was kind of a darker entity. I mean,
Mm-mm. No,
not
I don't. Mm-mm. All my lights are off. I'm officially ready for Halloween.
yeah, he wasn't so bad in the end, but in the
Mhm.
beginning, when I first started experiencing stuff with Freddy, it was real scary. It was
Mhm.
real. I mean, like oh, my heart was always beating real fast. It was creepy.
Oh my gosh.
But
Do you have an example of what he did?
yes. Okay, now nobody's ever seen Freddy, not even me. So
Okay.
he's not a visible entity. But I think if you've seen my my latest vlog, episode number 8, I talk about a little room above Stage Door Cafe.
Yeah. Mhm.
And all the way at the back, there's a room without any windows. And that room, I kid you not, you have to duck because it's so tiny, it's so little,
Mhm.
and it was never meant for storage. It was just an upper floor to a 5/8 scale building.
Mhm.
Well, according to cast member lore,
Oh my gosh. Are we gonna? Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay. I'm ready. I'm
okay,
ready.
according to cast member lore, Freddy was a third shift cast member that worked overnight to clean Golden Horseshoe
Oh
restaurant.
no.
And he was very passionate about the cleanliness of the restaurant. And he used to take his lunch breaks in that little room. It was so
Oh
dark
no.
and quiet that he would take his lunch breaks there and sleep for half an hour. Well, one day he was pretty old and tired, and he never woke up from his sleep.
Oh
And
my gosh.
apparently
I
he
thought that was
died in
going
that
a
room.
whole different way.
No. But apparently he died in that room, asleep on his lunch break.
Okay.
So that's how the legend goes. So I'm working there at night, and this was before I had heard specifics about the ghosts. Once again, I had just only known that it was haunted, and this was probably a couple days after I heard the giggling on the stage. So I'm working there at night, I'm closing it up, and I was remembering the little girl giggling on stage, and I was thinking, I wonder if I'll see anything else here, like, maybe I'll hear the girl again. But there was nothing, and I'm tidying up the chairs, and I don't know why, but I think I was trying to challenge the idea of there being ghosts. I was like, well, if there's any ghosts here, maybe you'll want to, do something. And right then, a stack of chairs that I had just put up on the table had been knocked over off the table
my God.
and landed on the floor below. And so I gave it the benefit of the doubt, going, I probably just didn't stack them right. But then another one fell. And I just went, oh my God, what's going on? And I heard footsteps walking towards me slowly, as if like he had pushed over the first set of chairs and started walking towards me, and pushed over the second set of chairs and kept walking towards me. That's what it felt like. And so I was like, okay, there is something here. And I just said, I'm sorry. Like I didn't know what to do. And so then nothing else happened. But I did hear shuffling in the room, the private room that the storage area is. And I thought, okay, that was really weird. So a couple days later, I'm closing again, and I'm go upstairs, and I hear shuffling in that room. And so I put my ear up to the door to listen, and it's like boxes are moving. I'm thinking, oh, my lead's probably up there like moving stuff for tomorrow. And I open the door, and the first thing you see is a tiny little sound room where they control the sound for the restaurant. You have to go through a 3.5 foot tall door to get to the next room. So you have to kind of crawl down.
Yeah, I can picture where it is now.
Yeah, and so I crawl through this tiny door, and it leads you to the storage area directly above Stage Door Cafe. And in the back is the tiny room without windows. And so I look around, and the boxes are all in their places, everything's fine, and there's nobody there. And I'm thinking, well, they must be in that tiny room. So I go over to the door. I opened a little door. It's another 3.5 foot tall little door. And inside is this room. And and I go to turn on the light, and it's one of those pull switches. You have to pull it to turn on the light. So I pull the thing, and the light doesn't turn on. And I'm like, oh, it must be like the bulb must be out or something. But inside this room is like a little dresser and a little table with a comb on it. And it's weird. And then then there's some boxes of like extra soda cups and stuff like that. But it was weird that there was furniture in there. And the ceiling is creepy because it's not like a neat and tidy structure. They had nailed the shingles onto the roof and just nailed the nails right through. So the nails are sticking out of the ceiling.
Oh.
And it's a real creepy place. And there's a little sign above the door that says, "Watch your head." And so anyway, so then the door slammed shut in front of me.
Oh.
Like it didn't want me to go into the room. And there was, I kid you not, there's no explanation for it. The door slammed shut. It was all the way open, and it just slammed shut. I was so creeped out. I ran back out, and I told my lead, and I'm like, I was just up in the storage room. And she goes like, oh, you shouldn't be there at night. And I'm like,
Oh my
I'm like,
gosh.
what's going on? She goes, that's Freddy's room. That's his private place. And she goes like, and he's there at night shuffling the boxes around and whatever. And I'm like, you're kidding me. And she goes, what? Did you experience something? I'm like, yeah, the door slammed shut. And she goes, yeah, see, he doesn't want you in there. And I'm like, and everyone else is not even phased by this.
Uh-huh.
They're like, oh yeah, don't go into Freddy's room. Like, I'm like, you're kidding me. Anyway, there's a lot more stories where that goes, but that was my first experience with Freddy, and that's when they told me his name. They said, oh yeah, we call him Freddy. We don't know what his real name was, but we call him Freddy
Mm-hmm.
because he's a nightmare.
Oh my
So
god. That's absolutely crazy. Man, I wish I would have asked you this on the podcast right before Halloween. That would have been cool.
I still got more stories, so
Okay, yeah. I'll probably ask you again when Halloween comes up. But man, I don't know. I'm debating if I should put this part. I think I'm gonna add this part into the podcast also because it's super interesting. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. An old man died up there. I thought you were gonna say he killed himself or something. I was glad it went a different way.
No, you see, the reason why I say that Freddy was kind of dark was because there's something to the story that he was a third shift cast member who cleaned the restaurant. He was very passionate, from what I learned. He was very passionate about keeping the restaurant clean and making it ready for the next day. Like the restaurant was special to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that from what I've gathered, bussers that don't really that do their job half-assed, that he gets angry by that. And
Okay.
so I think that the experiences that those cast members have were manifested because they weren't treating the restaurant right. They were skipping their work. They would skip mopping, or they would not clean all the tables properly. And I think that that's when he would kind of show himself. And so as I worked there many years longer, I would clean the place really. I think I've even mentioned it on one of my shows that I would like shine the sconces on the walls, and I would really clean the place. And after I really gave the place a lot of detail, he never really showed up. I mean, you could feel his presence. Like when I was finished working for the night, I could feel his presence in the restaurant, like he was waiting for me to finish so that way he could come out. And so I never had any more negative experiences after I started really cleaning the place up and treating it with respect. So that's kind of how I felt. And I know there was someone who commented on one of my videos. He was a third shift cast member, and he said, that's interesting. I've never experienced any weird stuff overnight at Golden Horseshoe. But I don't know, like a lot of people have. And so, I don't know. There's something. There's a creepy.
Well, to all the future Golden Horseshoe busboys out there, be sure to clean the restaurant really good so you don't have the same experience that Alex just told right now. All right, guys, that's gonna do it for this week. I hope you all enjoyed, and I want to hear all your guys' thoughts on our thoughts on the Fantasyland expansion and your comments on Alex's experience working at Disney. Be sure to check out his YouTube channel. He's got a really great channel going on with awesome videos. And you said in your latest video that you don't have a Patreon anymore, right?
Right, I don't have a Patreon anymore.
Okay, so he doesn't have a Patreon, but I believe there's a different way where you can donate to him. Why don't you say that right now?
Yes, there's an app called Venmo that you can get on your phone. It's Venmo. And basically, it's like a little money transferring app. And me and my sister use it to send money to each other. And once you install the app, then all you do is look up my name, which is the at sign and then AY Alexander, and that's my username. And if you send money to that, you can put however much money you want, and you control when you deposit the money. So that way, I mean, because I think Patreon, it's like based off of how many videos you produce. So yeah, so that's how I would like people to send money if that's what they would like to do.
Yeah, I'll put a link to the app in the description. If you guys want to support his vlogging adventures in Disneyland and his new show that he has, what is it called? My Thoughts On?
Yes, it's called My Thoughts, and then I usually put
yeah.
like a subject line after that.
Yes, so if you guys want to go check out that app and send some money his way. And I have a Patreon too, if you guys want to support me, and go ahead and follow me on Twitter because I post a lot of updates on future topics and all that stuff. And if you guys haven't entered my giveaway, check out the video I put out on Tomorrowland 1998, and you'll be entered to give away a Matterhorn Matt themed t-shirt. So I hope you all like this episode and have a great big beautiful tomorrow. Bye.